You can move away a little bit further from it. All right, you're good.
Okay, we're gonna start. So I have to stay close to the app. So I have to stand here. How many folks here were not here last week? Okay, great to see so many coming back. So just quickly for those of you who weren't here last week, this is part of a process to come up with a plan for the stone work. And our job, your job, over these series of meetings we're having is going to be to give the engineers enough information about what you need from the work so that they can come up with a plan that works. Okay. Last week, we worked on basically how to organize things coming from the water side. I mean, sorry, the land side of the work. So pedestrians, cars, all those, how they could get on the wharf and not have as many conflicts. All right, that was the charge last week. This week, we're going to be talking about what happens when you come to the wharf from the water via boats and what kind of conflicts happen there and how it could possibly be rearranged to make it work better. But before we start with that, I want to say that last week, those of you who were here, remember that we had a surprising amount of agreement on what people thought. The way we did it was we broke people up into three tables, three groups. We're going to do that again tonight. Table, table, and table. Meet the facilitator, and you're going to walk through a series of questions. You're going to draw on the map and so forth. And when you come out of it, we'll have a presentation, informal and quick, to tell everybody what happened at your table and also to tell the folks at home at Zoom what happened. Before we start, though, I want to let you know what people agreed on last week. There were 8 points of agreement. First one was that circular vehicle flow is needed on the wharf with 2 lanes, kind of like in airports, without blocking the barge ramp. And this is critical, even if it means that the wharf needs to be expanded. And this would minimize backing on the pier. Everybody agreed that that was important. Everybody also agreed that mixing vehicles and pedestrians is not good. So some kind of a walkway should be created, perhaps to go around the outside. Everybody agreed that handicap spaces are needed on the wharf, but the parking should be reassessed based on what kind of room you need in order to get a safer and more organized flow. And just to remind everybody, we're having 2 more meetings after this one. The last one will be only about parking. So we're going to revisit that discussion and figure out how to make all that work. Another point of agreement was, this came out of all 3 groups, was to move the CPC ramp to the wider part of the wharf. So the people who are disembarking and carrying luggage up the ramp, don't have to like walk through the narrow bottleneck in order to get to their vehicles. And there was some discussion about potentially reserving the northern side of the outer wharf for fishermen and gear. And that was something that came up last week, was generally thought to be a good idea, but is absolutely subject to discussion that will happen today. And also that will happen in the first meeting in May, which is I believe May 5th, Thursday, in which we'll be focusing completely on fishing operations. And then the other 2 things were that the barge ramp works well where it is and should stay there. And the T is working as well as it can where it is and should stay there. So we walked out of last week's meeting with that as a sort of basis. And now we're going to try it from the water side. Do you guys have any questions? Yes, sir.
I hesitate that you call it a barge ramp because that's the only access that every kind of boat on the island has for launching.
Sure,
The
ramp. Yeah.
I
I didn't mean.
know, I just want to
Okay,
make sure
be
you.
clear. No, I don't have all the names right yet. So.
Okay. I'll try to be quiet.
No. So at each table, you'll have a big drawing of the wharf, just like this. You'll be able to actually see it when you get closer. You have markers, you have an overhead picture of the wharf to help you look. And we also have a reproduction of the coastal boating regulations.
So that's with the handout on the table up front.
And I think that's all. We're going to break for groups for 45 minutes. And just to be clear, when you're having your discussions, envision the wharf in summer at its most chaotic and crazy, because that's when you have the most issues, and that's what we have to solve for.
Yeah.
Yes.
Last week, did we also pretty much agree that we might go for a concept which would possibly leave the end of the stone pier at the existing height that it is now?
That, Mark, that was mentioned in one group. No, so I didn't move it into this is an agreement, but I think that idea, at least the engineers, I think that idea has a lot of merit.
Yeah,
So when we talk about fishing operations on May 5th, that would definitely be something we're going to bring to the table.
yeah, that's the only reason I brought that up, for possible reference tonight is some people right now land boats at that existing height, and we bring private boats into the existing floats that is at that existing.
All right, yeah, so that will be. And I think that's all. Any questions? Any more questions? All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna count you guys off 1, 2, 3. And that's table 1, that's table 2, and that's table 3. And just, Brett, you're welcome to stand or sit, but just drag your chairs over to this table and set it up however you possible. I have to, 1, 2, 3.
Sure. I want to see what the groups are first, and then I'll go.
Because the argument will start here.
You don't want to leave here. Oh, okay.
Starting questions that we help. Our primary voting function. I use the very access system. That sounds good. I'm interested as far as. Still work.
We've got
That surprised me. All right, I'm gonna go out the side door right here. All right. Try to sleep with your eyes open.
kind of show where the existing, these are straight from your coastal waters. And they kind of show how these,
And then Atlantic crossing for you.
Atlantic crossing. We've got these plans, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna make notes on the plan. You guys are, and I've got some markers here. And, at the end of the day, we're gonna take our plan up and it's gonna show, people what we agreed on, what we disagreed on.
Some of those, the stays on the mooring,
Well,
you keep your 16-footer.
and safety issues that can be improved. And then also the holding tank. So the holding tank is if you guys mentioned the parking
We've heard
area.
that.
That goes in the holding tank. By the way. There's gonna be a separate meeting for parking.
Okay.
You know that's awesome. And then, anything else that is controversial, any fishermen related stuff, because we'll have a separate conversation on fishermen. So, what we've done here is, this is the.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know whether I should see it.
We've got the list of quotes. They brought out the ordinance, now this was done in 2007. And it's, I guess it's never been changed since 2007, so that seems to imply that either we're involved or going, So, what's that? Right, so, we have the CTC credit currently comes in up here, right? We have the FARD grant where, CTC Lionel Franklin is here. And as I mentioned earlier, so everybody is going on and on there. Commercial go to where
Transient boarding on time. Yep. Good.
access of people. Yeah, so it's trained it. And that's, it's very good recorded here. Says, let's see if there's a commercial boats are being used for fueling, for repair, or commercial passenger. Other one-time uses, including other vessels. Are you voting? Okay, good. Well, hey, you got the commercial business operations also is. So what would be a commercial business operation? And does the fuel come, how does the way that? From your boat?
You act this a little closer.
I golf and I like to swim down there.
Okay, actually, where's the swimming company?
Well, we swim a lot off here. If the ferry's out, we'll swim here, and if the high tide is high, we'll swim way
Okay,
here.
all right. I was wondering.
Now it's just even deeper.
All of that. So
Way out
So how do you get your commercial? So you draw it.
The rest we do.
Yeah, but we don't.
Right, water tax.
But yeah, but that's.
CTC operations or charter.
Yeah.
So they'll come into this main flow to CTC.
straddle.
Double widen the ramp.
And how do you use that?
How the town would have to pay for that. But then people go up and down and then.
And how's that working for you? Yeah, because of these orders. So I'll just mention here.
Yeah, so that,
I agree that.
we could spend a lot of time talking about that. Just a couple of concepts we can talk about. Yes, ramps to go both ways, or a wire ramp, or a switch ramp. But one of the things to be thinking about when we do talk about that is we can anecdotally going into the ramp. It's likely to be more. It's more credence to maybe make that wire. It's a long stretch. And if you're sending the passage, it's not as easy as
So I'm gonna. So the big club is here.
So that's very helpful. And,
I do.
So that is, those are also ramps.
So far, so good. It's not, it doesn't appear to be that congested.
yeah, we're trying to,
Long time, I can see the ramp.
Practical reality is
Speak overall. There needs to be some maintenance down on shoulders under the understructure of the pier itself, not the stone part. So.
These are have to go somewhere.
So it's nice to talk to three again. The letters we all came and used to.
Just to be clear, so everybody
section of the steel pipe that
take off.
the pipes are rotted out.
So ADA requirements are that some
Deteriorated.
customer very
Bottom walls are, walk down
it's supposed to be ADA requirements. People talk about an ADA. That's maybe where you're ended up, so that does not meet the ADA requirements, so we have to get a special.
Then the ramp itself is. With the dredging going on, there may be some undermining.
So do you have a
local fire trap.
Well, so we're doing a facility in Boston right now. And,
Yeah, they could be called together. They could be locked down.
So it's all one piece. It goes down.
the boat ramp is very access.
So, and I think,
You have a defined channel.
what gets us into the.
Cementing.
So we all agree that he's gonna move.
I think we're just.
Yeah.
Yeah, these usually fluctuates standards.
So, is there a place that locates?
Yeah, the tap.
So it's on one side.
And then we're really, really like,
Make this like.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's a lake plant. Right.
Well, make this.
That's good.
Here, or they.
I'm sure you're all very familiar with configurations and uses. We understand that sometimes there are key periods or weather that things have to move around and shift. But the intent is to think about how the water coming out. So,
With a great,
good and bad, comes down to the law, but especially for this. Any questions on what's on the table?
No, I had, maybe more actually.
I would introduce it to larger.
Two-way traffic or stick on.
So that, in the cons report, they have two ramps there. You can subdivide it down, but you can load it both at the same time.
You know,
So that's interesting. That actually gets into the first question, where maybe, where is there conflict or safety rules or book contracts? Is there conflict with?
people very lightly waited to talk and stuff.
In a hotel.
It's clear.
And they don't even like to talk about it. Going around. But you do, you're gonna get out.
Anybody can get.
I bet, is it a problem?
And I don't-
So if you think there's more people that can be what instead of. Is there some order clause here? Because everybody.
So you say they could get a transient, a temporary tie-up? Say it costs you like- Oh,
But there's no fence there.
Contract law.
Yeah, you can't do that. Come in and carry on.
So one way to resolve it.
Okay,
And how you run that as a president, only this year.
Sure.
But people that just come and work.
Taxpayers, we're talking about.
Yeah, winter is harder to work with me.
So you still need access, but maybe it's somewhere else?
Yeah. I have another. Well,
what you're saying, probably right now, you got to make one.
well, and here's the
There,
other.
where it's got to be one.
Not to sound like an old guy, but when I was a kid, nobody contractors back and then
So there's,
it didn't happen. And I don't.
we agree, summer
Also,
congestion
look at other towns, how they offer more, contractors don't just get over.
is driving
Parking spots, let them park
need
outside.
for,
And you can get driven down to the
two-way,
taxis on the island.
right.
That was one of the ways that they got that.
Next question.
Well, there's no, and I'm not, I live here, I understand contracting, but that's their problem. And if you wanna have one of them, you make one foundation is to have a home, and they can do it right out there, and even leave their vehicle, slave in your house, you can drive down the road. That's why it makes the whole.
So that's a policy thing that would be change, because right now, the policy allows the activity as it goes. So the community's excited that, but it creates problems.
I think the resident has to be.
No, I have friends.
And right now, there's traditional policies.
Yeah. And it's all the boats in there.
Yeah.
And then
Where the cars come from.
My house down.
So a contractor parking on here to here.
All the way up.
Now it's there, down and I have to park up on the road. Contractor. And,
They don't respect the unload mode.
But that's an enforcement. I agree with you, but that's an enforcement.
So that's people congregating. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, they're wrapped up so they can go up, yeah, okay.
That's what I heard the last time.
So that's enforcement.
So maybe so I don't know that we agree or disagree on the way the uses are. I apologize for being on. But maybe we could put like disagree on what we do. Those are some ideas on how to resolve it. And then there's another issue. Kind of going last time with the one with that last part.
Yeah, 17.
Maybe more simplistically, it's.
I've seen small uses. Oh, well, here.
How do we manage commercial uses? You know, it's definitely a draw to the island. Yeah.
So what's the takeaway? We need to incorporate loading and unloading. Is that a we agree on it? Does everybody like that?
For now.
Where they tell somebody.
No,
It's gonna be. To your point, that's gonna be.
no, wait, it's not right. There was also kind of, you know, I think it's something to do. I will not do that. Yeah, nothing going on. They, I don't know how much you guys know better.
So, what about what is on the board there? On some communities, they actually back down and, you know, offload it onto the float. But wrap it up before
We're doing it, I don't know, maybe that time of year where there's 3 weeks of really nice weather before all the months. And then it's gone. Right, yeah, by the middle of September, October, half of the leaves will start to go away. Then you got another good like 3 weeks. I totally see that.
Why not? Kind of thing, as long as the people pay for it. Because
Those 8 to 10 weeks, there's, yeah, a lot of time.
So it seems like just stop it. So, no, I've never heard, I'm not saying it's not unsafe, but I've never found on
So on your CT.
other than, somebody go walk. But as far as tracking, I've never heard that's a whole thing, but what I will tell you is, there's people, I do believe there's no water that's something that happens.
You mean actual golf ball spot?
Yeah. Oh, but many,
So this.
I think that's a, if we have a new, I think we're going to like a motorcycle and golf ball. What you guys, yes, this rail is more golf ball went through my client's car in one window one night. Oh my God. I remember that very But I'm just saying.
Yep, so I got a suggestion on the floor, and I'm gonna talk about, see how this flies. So, there are possibilities to resolve some of this conflict by having additional floats sort of out of the water, and then you might have a launch service that went back and forth between them.
That would work great, yeah.
Right, so that would work great, but that's
They make their
individual
own
boats
clothes
go on
on
mooring,
mooring.
and then they radio it. But right, but I'm talking about more like floats, you know, kind of.
They're launched, kind of beat up, so kind of like, he said, well, just talk.
All, there's all very possible. Wherever there's not like safety issues.
Any other conflicts? Yes, sir. Potentially, but I think that's there, because that's where the big
In the summer.
right, it's fall, right, yeah, summer comes around, so that's, we used to that
And it was brought up last week that if we're down with the new channel, there's a possibility of maybe putting floats here, but then again, this dude has to come up with the money for it. So we kind of pay for that shit. That's right. Yeah. Either replace or change. I totally believe that. I totally believe that.
That's right, I wouldn't get into the weeds on that with you folks right now, but that is. The issue is what kind of mooring is really what's that structure.
Yeah.
And what kind of reinforcement will be required to be able to do that, and you might not like the possibility of being able to focus.
It's pretty low water.
But I agree with some comments that we get a real
First time I ever did going out.
And obviously, if you can create a space that build it, they will come. But the problem is, once it's there, 15 more photos, in 2 years, will be just.
I don't know, if any limit on the number of photos.
So I think before you do any space after the spring. So if you put a sidewalk will tell you, and now you can start having.
So where do people interest, very small, but these are, that's what the, you call those.
I remember.
Everybody agrees with that?
I said, don't get.
But why don't we put it on?
Somebody wants to be down here, they got it all. Easy.
I'm just gonna say, congestion, I mean, everybody keeps going into this area, right?
But I also think if our illumination was gonna be then 17 and 15, 17,
And,
I don't know how you get the vote.
Exactly. It's still cheaper than CPC.
It's not right for the contract. You're not making the building house. Financially, be easy for contractors. I think you just.
The other side of the contract, like you said, over budget, it's so much less money, and those contractors have big ass quotes, and you know, there's like.
So much. So, because even though like, supposedly we have a case of our resident, reality of it is a lot of this area. I'm just saying, practical reality of the space there.
And are you saying that? Well, then, is there any elbow?
Introduced you, Jennifer, would you mind drawing that?
And you're widening channel.
Really not a lot of.
So, is there,
That's true. No,
No,
that's, I've already hit bottom many times since last summer, yeah.
I put it in one new wall, so like the cousins in West Cousins Island was.
I don't know, I was just thinking about, you know, if you turn that.
Yeah,
Save
save
money,
but he was supposed to have a sticker tie up.
Coming up.
And that, I suggested that.
So it's sort of configuration on the inside, whether it's floors or splits or something, but yeah.
Just so you know.
Then you can have a ramp.
That's what Jim.
There is a.
So the only issue with that one is that part on the town, isn't that ladder access?
Which boat kind of good was
Is that your intent for me to leave that ladder access? Strong back.
I'm gonna put that on
Good. Okay. So that's-
Down by the.
What was the
question?
Who needs more space?
Right now, we have a follow-up. We have to get rid of that. That would be, I think it's a must anyway.
Yeah, so that's a policy thing, right? That it's a grant project. So that's why that.
Maybe the position of close to seven. Yeah, and, yeah, well, that's.
I think it's things that have.
It's still allowed on the.
What we've got there is we have. We have a
All right, let me, so that's sort of observe conflicts and safety issues before we get to this next one. Where have you observed experience conflict with major inconvenience? Loading or unloading, filling supplies, groceries. You already did, right? So basically,
Also,
it's
So that can be later before.
yeah, so these lines would come back.
Well, in the evening, they're not.
Right now, I think
They go up to the line.
They're lined up in grades.
well, you have some building.
They're lined up in groups.
They let it create more space.
Yeah. But they wanna-
Okay, for our.
But I think that's part of the problem. Is there's no organization.
Where's he gonna move it? Usually at that point, we're not watching forward. And the one we got offshore, that's a good idea.
But it's. That would make it easier, so if somebody, if you got a ticket, say $40, they'll sign up with access, and the next time they get more.
Yeah.
I think an easy one, eventually.
And they have been times when people call the hotel.
But that's just,
They don't say just a small.
Is there a broad agreement on that, that it's an enforcement issue, or is it a capacity issue and an enforcement?
Yeah, so what happens is these trains are closed.
So.
Yeah.
I know we're gonna talk about this here, but what I was thinking was. I had my.
Yeah, this is. Sign it, I don't know, yeah.
I'm not.
Question. And then someone from them, so I know that.
As far as
Someone
official.
from them wants to land, and you see it open up.
Oh, it's there. Yeah, you walk.
Quickly gets over.
Not that much water.
Well.
Serious.
You're exactly right.
I yelled at them, and I told them not to leave it there.
Good boy.
I'm not saying that that's fire.
So it's exactly, I think, yeah, that's a good one.
What color?
So, I've been down there before, there's been official night, I believe.
I understand the water law. But they go over there.
So let's go,
Yeah.
do any folks need less? Okay.
No, I mean, that would be on.
My observation, but I see a lot of big holes.
No, and I don't.
Come back down several hours later, meanwhile, they paid for the mountain.
And here we go. And you know, I hear it again.
Every fact, I mean, is the problem.
You live in Buffalo, you shouldn't have.
Has anybody been up to,
That's a similar point.
so what they do there is they have a lot of. They want to get on the hearing.
Well, so that's very interesting.
They put,
Maybe
put a site in the harbor, it's more than out there. So people spend first place like this. Then they have a.
Right. So there's this thing that happens about weather and what you really need to do when you're in the water. And so there needs to be flexibility. I think we're trying to focus on common, like sunny out, Saturday. That type of situation. Understanding there needs to be flexibility from a safety standpoint. Do what you need to do. There's oftentimes in off seasons, there's not as much pressure, but if there is constant pressure in certain areas.
That eliminates all that crowd.
So the only town has parts that should be.
As long as go.
The only reason I started.
What's the takeaway from that? So it's
I was using I tie in. There was too many books. Limit it and then we can go.
I've got encouraged more of these opportunities. Discourage.
I think that the triple was definitely really help. We just don't see that.
All right, how about, categories of votes? Are there some types that need more or some types that need less space? I think, well, think the move to it as a
So,
study.
yes,
Yes. So there are other types that we can get out of space.
So you're talking about.
Yeah, so that's.
Went off to the little thing. Yeah, I think
Well,
that's-
one side is-
Yeah, if you look up here.
The one side is-
Yeah, yeah.
So if we.
Should some of those.
I asked you.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we'll allow for the one note to be.
Demolition derby. Contract is for money and they build the tank.
Was a big deal.
So we're talking about now, so we basically call out here. Yeah.
No, fine, it's 16, 17, but. She said- Okay, open it. Oh, yeah, we do that.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, and they get all mixed up in here, that's what. It is, oh, yeah. What it pops up.
Because people try here and that's the.
Yeah, right in here is a total mess, yeah. Stephen Porter would know, he was on that.
Take this vote, just make it straight instead of making it go.
Mike, Glenn.
So that would be just when I'm trying to.
Yeah, I think it has somewhat to do with the way that we got storage around there too.
I would skip when the title was almost nothing.
Exactly. I've been down there and the whole thing's like a snake, going like, it doesn't matter what's going on with the whole thing.
Probably less than 15% of the weight. They.
Yeah, so I do agree with Michael. Because I know that that's something that is used quite a bit to look at, but,
So it should be free and closed.
yeah.
Where's that?
Yeah, I don't think there's a.
So you're talking about. No, there was a lot of talk about Christmas slipper law out there.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Is that possible?
So.
That would be nice.
That's a very island. You can drive.
drawn a couple of steps on the outside of the area as far as we try to build it with the cameras or what we're. So the pilings go down and then
But again, when you're saying, well, then it's easier this time around too.
so it's basically the tires make fenders. Yeah. Yeah, they're strapped around. So if you even just write fender miles, panels.
That'd be the hands we located there, but they just kind of very tight on the other side of the door, and it's protection of the door. Like that's where we're going to be.
Some carrier clothes and some
This is like, when the ferry comes in, there's a lot of different ways to handle it. I mean, you go down to Staten Island ferry, they come in. I guess we're kind of a little bit.
So part of that is, it's different when you have roll on, roll off too.
This is the last one. Should the town maintain
allowed that aren't really being taken advantage of.
So it's kind of a statement on the way, but there was a lot of comments.
From your field, this kind of very place, construction, similar size, whatever, you can.
So it would cost a lot of, and we're talking about flexible use. Probably to come up with a more effective.
To come up with it, I'm only trying to highlight one. So in the, fall, they, you, maintain it, there's no factor here.
Right, because it's,
But it, most of the time, wide open is the contract.
Well, maybe there's likely to be a better option with very heavy concrete.
So the only problem is, when the problem, especially in the fall, is big, is huge, because you come in. Oh, yeah, I know, yeah. My response to the last but I think it's very important. On both sides, but a lot of times streamline that out with the provides. But 3 weeks ago, a lot of traffic was off, and I just think that we could.
Well, that is a good point for those warrants. Instead of weather. when
That
they're
is,
needed
right,
to-
yeah, so, yeah.
They can say, oh, blocking the stuff.
Yeah.
Even, you get some.
Just gonna eliminate traffic.
Part of what we were talking about, even the bigger portion of ramp that came from the wider, the older wider portion. Yeah, keep the bigger pier, so it's,
When it's blowing and
yeah, keep this down low and then ramp it up.
I can tell you that, I will, I like to say, I will over by the.
Well, if you don't get the golf
Now there's a whole new channel there.
Yeah, so it's even easier. I know, I have to say, I have a.
So there's two locations now, maybe what you're talking about is somewhere with compromises, somewhere restricted that to a location.
I don't think that one.
No, I don't.
Spend money. Spend money. When replacement required.
I think it was a good idea. I think we can narrow it down.
Talking about that last night.
But it does, with the dredging, like I said, it opens up access to be able to take traps off, noise.
Has it been 30 years?
And. Really does.
But I mean,
But, you know, with the way the wind goes, it's really.
Well, it should probably only happen every 10 years.
Now that you said that.
Okay, so we need a spokesman among your groups. Someone is gonna be charged to stand up. And we agree. So we're just gonna move you that. Okay. Talking about related conflicts and safety issues being approved. One, correct overcrowding. Okay, that is one. So, two pedestrian lanes to the boat. You know, enforcement will improve safety. So whenever you want to get these rules, not a lot of enforcement.
We're gonna have a whole meeting on fishing operations, so I think that we'll part of that over now. That's just a two-minute discussion though.
There's one more,
Somebody's down there, Matt.
Somebody to join. Yep, and we're at the storm here, right? Yeah.
So, a lot of wind coming, a lot of wind coming, all workers in there all the time.
And maybe what we need is like a computer management.
So you all wrapped up, probably, or also.
Yeah, and then the sand is coming out, holding back.
Here's another safety issue.
Hey, I don't know, but you got to have like 7 years. Yeah, that is increased.
Yeah, I just wanted to
The reason some of these ships are not
Very short window now, to get it, they're much better. Yeah. Jason still has, told me that you gotta have seven.
It's just an observation, the roads are larger.
You're gonna get from dollars. People use it, put it out, and then it's all empty here. You know, it's probably totally illegal, but you get like, God, we gotta push all that sand up here, we have. I tried to give it share, but he's not.
And then the CPC is available to land that and amongst stuff.
Okay, so we agree.
Right, that's a good point, as far as uses go, that,
Area.
float A, right.
Is over Low fee means
It's like
you
a
relocated.
budget,
You know, usually pretty much the last.
Summer projection is driving fees.
So,
Alright, so that's, secondary access, taxis, cash management,
yeah, I'm looking on board with John Jackson. I'm always here, what, friends? How is it possible that you might be able to start right out for just a couple of months, you know? Maybe tax the hotel or somebody, or find somebody, because that would alleviate the problem.
That's good, so that's,
Exactly, yeah, and maybe you put a couple more, you know, we get a couple of
And
money.
then, buyers need to be.
Always go to the repair. Yeah, yeah, because more places, like everybody says, you know, like park here and park here. And you can't- Thinking about pushing this out further, for just the comments, you know, and then take it away and leave the rest of it, I don't know, that's. Seems to me like a possible, because we don't wanna be unfriendly island, you know, but at the same time, they're really making us unfriendly because this. Yeah. that makes sense.
Land there.
Yeah.
Let's go in.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that.
There's 3 more here, and we talked on most of it. I'll just kind of read through them, like, we're kind of reviewing. So we talked about both sizes, the length of them, as well as square houses, and then shop boats, and the annual residential. Garage comparison,
Okay, and then holding tank, the only thing we put in the holding section
here, should the town maintain or keep away from.
But you can buy it.
We haven't really talked about that, we talked about modifying.
because this is favorable.
So thoughts on keeping the So the other piece of it is do you put a different type of wave break in there that would better suit you?
Right, because
Floating wave break, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
I would like an opinion right now, that would go up and down with a 3.
because you have a federal channel,
Opinion.
because you have the Army Corps, you are subject to well, wait a minute. So, this is the federal channel. No, United States.
Yeah, they're basically.
I mean, it's taking away.
Take it down a little bit.
Sure, we can try to add something.
So when you're absolutely.
Yeah. How deep are they? The spacing comes into play.
I think if we
There has to be a hierarchy.
They do make it.
So the other thing that we agree on, we're interested in, which I think is one of the important things, encourage awarding these.
Yeah, so that's what they were talking about, sunset here. Yeah, they're talking more about it. So. Yeah.
So, the other thing I didn't highlight on this this point about creating additional effort into.
You don't have the, about these things are being kept clear.
Yeah, what are they, 12 to 7 pretty steel, I think that goes to what we're talking about.
You mean, the permanent?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the reasons you have.
I think the size of the light was good. The width is really close.
This is quite here.
You know, the biggest thing is. Everybody knows, they all have their, you know, you both have. You're either a fiberglass or an aluminum or wood. You repair it, go repair it, and go back.
I thought it might be efficient.
Yeah, it's 17 now.
Feet is a good size stone.
Yeah.
Maybe we like 17 money, I was looking like an 8.
Exactly. And less than 16, you're gonna have trouble going across.
The last several years, they come in. They're not able to follow. Really.
You don't have to worry about that.
And when you get to 14,
You've got plenty of water now. And, but you have.
Possible 16
so it's not.
Oh, no.
So I think this is, this is our facility. We pay.
What about,
Utilities that use- I haven't talked to you, so it's called- I think it's for use.
we need fresh water.
There's definitely.
There's no municipal source of fresh water, so that's step one. A private well would be required, and that can.
I think that's coming. Some people bring more lighting.
That's what it brings.
I agree.
It's actually on the dark side. Yeah, all the country gets very much.
Well, they're trying to, they're making the low level students like that. It's still your.
How many people actually?
You need to have a power.
Be educated.
Let's say that we're
Would you like to have water, John? I was actually at the Desert Breakout.
new ferry landing.
Tell them that we could have water.
Take off, move back and right.
If that ever happens,
You're gonna follow those two.
which houses
Oh, the ladder slope, right. So that's- And that's the winter slope too.
Doesn't, so not, the only thing is also you can push out, slow down.
I think the ramp is gonna kind of extend it, so it's maybe the actual boarding float for CTC doesn't move that much. But the top takeoff goes all the land and then follows the little.
he's got the point, so I don't know.
We could try to solve a big poetry job. It's not, it's last week.
Could be under, yeah, we could look at that, but I
Good point, Johnny made.
Goes up here.
yeah.
So we just put time,
That would be the other thing, is if you've got a wider ramp, there may need to be additional structure there, and then you can double use those and basically attack the environment on the outside. So you just keep them outboard. What it does though, is it affects what we were talking about land variance right now. Obviously, with North Preston, they've got a lot of facility, but if you box them in, because it's moved out, I would just be a little concerned. I wouldn't think about that.
I don't, no, because right now, well, I see they go along, I have the original.
I'm watching it from
And
here.
because, well, there's legend.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So you're talking about. I don't think it is.
So we may not, so we gotta look at that symmetry on that. That's one of the things we requested of you guys. I think. So that survey, Mark, is going to inform what we have for use there. I think it's great.
The other thing is, you know, are we gonna design something? Or are we gonna just design it? Shoot down on the ramp like that? Or are we gonna push it out a little bit?
So you were old enough now, you just.
So, again, gets to that as-built survey where the channel is sort of optimize that, and then, with,
Of the same.
also commit.
Organized for that.
Whether it's switchback or, you know, sing along, wire and, or whatever, it's all.
Oh, no.
Because we're fair,
Right, yeah. And so maybe we take advantage of that, and sort of interface, so I can get deeper and, work around that. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't we have to necessarily.
Yeah, I just wanted to point it out.
Guys did great.
Oh, this is, yeah, this is really good.
So we also talked about those.
We want to make it. Oh, you're gonna do.
So I did it last week, I don't want to do it again this week.
I didn't see it.
I think he did. No, he was really good. You were.
So, you're talking a big cloud, and it doesn't matter.
There you go. Yeah.
What he said was you can do that.
Most of this week, I think.
Any closing remarks?
Yeah, so we're
Who's gonna?
Oh, my
I think everyone just heard it on that.
That's just.
Teddy, it will make for a good presentation.
And I think they just heard your response. You guys make some progress.
These guys wanted the money, we made you part. And you. No. We're gonna have an untied boats. We need a big axe. We just need to put a big axe down there and say, and this axe is all we need. Is that like an old one that have on the water?
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. So we're just for the presentation and then questions. Good morning. If you guys want to take a seat, we're gonna have table one for presenting. And then we're gonna try to get through this presentation in time to
Yeah. Well, some of them I know already. All right, good evening. So basically, we're talking about float placements was a lot of the discussion today. Most of these floats were okay. We were thinking about shifting this one, you know, moving it this way to add. Because the way that this one is not very useful, the way the direction that it's turned. Enforcing or limiting the parking in this area only for unloading and loading. Encouraging using moorings that are available by the inn or whoever else. Trying to keep these areas here open to basically unload and load traps. A lot of community members use their skips to unload here and also here. Groceries, family members, whatever. Once again, the CPC top of the boat ramp type deal. 2 ramps going down to their float, make their float larger. Maybe another float to accommodate a shed. That was part of the discussion a little bit. Adding 2 floats, the B floats that are here would be currently underneath the ramps, moving those and tying them, making this area larger to accommodate 1 or 2 floats there. So no, we're not losing these floats as a tie-up. Potentially adding some here because the dredging increased the water there. So the configuration of it is kind of up in the air. We just drew something up there. We talked about fixing the ladders that are here, here, and here. Either making them ramp or keeping it a ladder. So that wasn't. So the 2-way ramps would just be during the summer. In the winter, removing one due to the weather. That was suggested by Beth, which is a boat captain for the CTC. Would also be better for maintenance. They only have to take care of 1 ramp during the winter. Sorry, I can't remember what we wrote down. I believe that's pretty much all of it. Unless some of the group has something to add.
On the last question to the group about maintaining the wave rate, I think we favored replacement with the floating rate or whatever configuration to be determined. And the advantage there was that that would also be additional tire space. Don't try to fix the one that's there.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Thank you. Very good. I'm happy.
That's yours.
Yeah. I've got to be looking out for it. Okay, so my team facilitated limited handwriting skills, so I'm gonna do my best to read some of this. But so I think that we talked a lot about the same kind of issues. I think we talked about where we would put floats, where we wouldn't put floats. The group really kind of focused on that there is just not enough room
to use these floats the way that we're using them now. And that I think that everybody agreed that the transient tie-ups that are available there now, whether it's one, 2 or 3, depending on the size of the boats, we're not getting, a lot of value out of that. So, and also, we're creating an expectation that there may be transient space available when the reality is in the summer, it probably isn't going to be. So just eliminating the transient floats altogether, creating a larger loading and unloading zone, and potentially adding more small dinghy tie-up someplace in the anticipation that more people would be hopefully using moorings. So same kind of thing, just trying to direct people out to moorings because there's just not enough space here. We talked about inside here, that's, obviously it's really full. We talked about limiting who could get permits. I don't think that there was a total consensus on that, but, so there was discussion about raising the price on permits, I think in general, but definitely raising the price on non-resident, non-taxpayers, or perhaps not allowing non-resident, non-taxpayers to get permits at all. But I don't think that we had a full consensus on that. We talked a little bit about congestion and usage right here again, with, you see it, hotel van. They're not the only ones, so not to exclusively pick on them, but other people do the same thing. But it does seem like they're down there a lot, and their boat a lot of times is here rather than being inside and kind of blocking things. We also talked about the wave break, and I think there was consensus that the wave break, it needs to at the very least be assessed, but probably removed. And everybody liked the idea of doing floats along that, taking advantage of that space for some kind of wave breaking floats. We talked about the deep draft floats. There's not a lot of deep draft here, so the concrete floats also to us made a lot of sense. But that would definitely need to be looked into. And we talked about kind of shifting if the footprint was able to be changed, if this was deemed to be just too small out here on the pier for all the use, fishermen, people coming in to get stuff off of these floats. If this is deemed to be too small and we decide to make it wider, making it wider on this side, so we could push all this out this direction because there's better water over here than over here. And we talked about also doing floats here. We weren't sure about the dredging and how far that went. I guess Ted probably knows, I guess. So potentially doing more floats here, potentially extending this ramp to take advantage of the deeper water depth here, and definitely rebuilding that ramp. One thing everybody agreed on is that residents should have priority for that dinghy tie-up area.
So food for thought, on average, we have 3 no more than 5 non-resident tie-up stickers that we sell. That one wouldn't give you a whole, a lot more space to work with. Because most people find a way to fall within that resident category. If they aren't already, they find a way to do it.
Right, so that was one of the things we talked about too, was trying to,
If you're a taxpayer or legal resident, there's 5 was the maximum we've ever sold in 1 year for the non-residents that paid the $375.
So I think that's it. I think that's all we talked about.
Just one thing on Peter's comment is, we came up with 6 in our little discussion that we knew of. So maybe they got somebody got a resident fee that shouldn't have, I'm not sure, but.
Maybe not buying a permit at all.
We
There's
checked,
definitely some of those.
so Ralph, we check to see if they come in and we don't know who they are, or we question it, we check to see if they're a taxpayer. If they're not a taxpayer, they have to have their license be on shebang.
Yeah.
And so we have had people in the past who didn't have either, and they changed their license to show that they were a shebang resident. And that's how they got around that part. But you got somebody like JPS who's neither, and they'll pay it, but we don't have a lot of people that don't, but there have been people who found a way to do that.
Oh, and I guess the last thing that we talked about was, you know, it kind of involved the hotel van and, you know, transient people and stuff like that, but maybe needing more enforcement. Anybody from our group notice that I missed anything? I think that's.
Next meeting, maybe be in the room for-
And while I'm setting up, just real quick, Ted, just while I'm setting up, Ted Augustine's here. They're working on the dredging work. So if folks have questions for Ted, certainly we're gonna probably head out of here in 10 minutes or so. But I want to make sure that we don't spend here that set in with our group. So thank you for your feedback.
I think we should all give them a round of applause.
Yeah. Will the easel make it for one more presentation? Last legs, pardon the pun. Okay. Yeah, it was good there. Okay, so our group appointed me to come up here and talk to you again. As far as relocations and conflicts, we did focus quite a bit on the area down here in Tutcliffe and had some of the very similar conversations that have already been mentioned as far as who gets access, whether it's taxpayers only, if we have separate transient tie-up is one of the things that this group came up with, meaning if you took floats and put them out on a mooring and allowed access that way, maybe in the summer to take some of the congestion off of what's going on out here. We also talked about additional floats maybe considered in the cove back in here. And we talked about adding floats either through modification of the wave break to add floats in here or to do some work on the outside of this to allow access on the backside, acknowledging that maybe in the winter that wouldn't be as good as it might be, you know, as the wind shifts seasonally. So we talked about that. And then as far as we had some discussions that focused on the width and that we've got to maybe some food for thought that there wasn't necessarily agreement on, but folks want to maybe talk about it a little bit more. Is limiting the beam, maybe think about instead of a 17-foot length, that we're maybe thinking about a 16-foot length. So those type of issues to allow enough room so that if we can't expand, but there was discussion about turning this float off to the end here, if it can be protected, and then possibly pushing these floats out towards where it's been dredged to allow more access in between here. Talked about adding additional space or over the storm float area. And maybe that's something that happens where there's either reconfiguration or additional space added there. As far as reconfiguring for dock configurations, amount of space, we really focused on this area here, maybe adding punt float there. We did talk about takeoff and making sure that we don't lose these two floats here. But I guess what we talked about, sort of holding tank issue there, is making sure that we get the as-built information from the dredge work when it's done, so that we can really understand what kind of depths and what kind of working room we have there to be able to advise on that. Some of the things that we strongly agreed on, I think, or at least with that consensus, had to do with enforcement, which I think came up before. Who gets to use, and that's specific to the punt floats. And then also in here, as far as loading and unloading, where you've got time restrictions on that, and maybe in the summer, there's more effort to make sure that that isn't just a tie-up spot.
struggled a little bit on how you pay for some of this, meaning, is it just taxpayers, is it guests that get access to the punt floats? I think Vika made a point that there's only 5 non-resident maybe passes that get sold on an annual basis there, but there was discussion about contractors and are they residents or are they not, and how those costs get passed through, so how the capital costs get dealt with for providing additional space and then the maintenance costs associated with that too. So those are some items that we have for more discussion later in our group. Anything I missed as far as things that we talked about?
I think you did good. It seems like there's a general consensus of straightening out the elbow.
Yeah.
Maybe going further.
Right, taking this up further, and that's part of when we were talking about, should the town maintain or keep the wave break, some of the similar ideas with concrete floats or other floating wave attenuation in lieu of maybe a fixed wave break or something for further discussion down the road. So we're gonna look into getting some as-built information on that wave break and see what we can do to kind of think about how we could reconfigure it in lieu of a full replacement or make a determination on how much more service life you get out of that. So as you're thinking about phasing or staging work, that you can be considerate of how to use that facility going forward to your advantage. But definitely, I think the group agreed that it's better to have some sort of wave break than none.
Yeah.
So keeping it for sure, but maybe it needs to be reconfigured.
And Jason, we did talk about maintaining some access for fishing boats. In other words,
right.
if you don't raise the end of Stone Wharf, that will maintain that northerly
Right.
side.
We talked about here,
Yeah.
maybe keeping it lower, but we also talked about having a secondary access point over here. And there's, I think, some additional discussion about the timing on that and the uses of that, different times of the year to allow flexibility, but also accommodate the primary uses that are ongoing at those times.
Yeah, and we also talked about obviously trying to maintain at least the existing commercial.
Correct.
And we talked about the barge ramp will probably decide to raise the main part of the wharf. The barge ramp's gonna have to be completely rebuilt, probably repitched.
Yep. Change
Probably
it.
lengthened.
Yeah. It most certainly would be. Yeah. All right, that's all I had. If no further comments, thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you, everybody. Great job.
So we'll be back on May 5th. May 5th. So we got a couple weeks. We're gonna digest this and we're gonna see you back here.